When it's time to travel in class, Unique Class of Limousine Service offers the finest quality, surpasses all your expectations, and provides the best quality to meet all your needs. Unique Class of Limousine Service is a premier transportation company servicing the Jackson metropolitan area. So book your next wedding, prom, party, or event with the Unique Class of Limousine Service by calling 901 219 4856. You can also follow Unique Class of Limousine Service on Facebook and Instagram. And oh yeah, tell them Sonia sent you.
She say sports. She say sports. She say sports. She say sports.
Hey y'all, it's your girl Sonia, and welcome back to She Say Sports. Today I have with me Mrs. LeTesha Wheeler, and she is the author of Half Breed: Finding Unity in a Divided World. Hey LeTesha, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing well. It's been a long time.
It's been a long time. I was just thinking earlier today, I think you were the first person I told that I was pregnant with my second child.
Oh my God, I remember that now. Yeah. How are they doing?
Yeah. They're doing wonderful. He will be 15 this week.
That's crazy.
That's how long it's been, girl.
Time has flown. I mean, it has truly flown. So everybody's been fine during COVID and everything and all that.
Everybody stayed healthy. No one was sick, or if they did, they recovered pretty quickly. So yeah, we're doing great.
Praise God. Great. So tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, LeTesha.
So I'm married. My husband, James, and I have been married. We'll be 18 years this year.
Wow.
Yeah. And because you remember.
Tell them I said hi.
I will. You remember when we were just freshly newlyweds? Jalen, our oldest, just turned 17 last month. And then my baby will be 15 this week. So married, have 2 kids. They are highly involved in sports, basketball, track, football. I'm running around like Uber mom right now from every sport and camp and tournament, and it's great. I love it because my oldest is getting ready to start his senior year. So I know this season will pass here soon, but
wow.
Doing well.
This is crazy. Senior in high school.
Senior in high school.
You guys will soon be empty nesters.
We will. Just about 2 years from now, 2-3 years.
Yeah, right. So, well, LeTesha, you wrote a book on, and this is just part of it, being biracial in America. But before we get into the book, could you share with me about when you were growing up? How was it for you and your sisters? Because there's 4 of you, right?
Yes.
Four ladies. 4.
Mm-hmm.
How was it growing up in a community, and were you treated differently because you were biracial? And how was that for you guys?
That dynamic is very interesting because we grew up in 3 different states. And so when I was a young girl in my elementary years, I lived in Houston, Texas. I lived in the country that was more rural, and many of the population of those little country towns were mostly Black. At least on the side of town we lived in was mostly Black.
Okay.
And then I moved back because I was born in Seattle, but I moved back to Seattle when I was 8, and that is mostly Caucasian and Asian, right? Heritage there. And then I lived in Lake Charles, Louisiana when I started high school, which was Creole and Black and white.
Wow.
And then I moved back to Seattle and finished out high school at an all-white high school. So when you ask how were you treated, I'd have to say what year?
Okay.
What time?
Well, I guess when you were in Seattle. When you were in Seattle.
When I was in Seattle, there is a very interesting dynamic because there is the Fort Lewis is south of Seattle, but it's an Army base, and many times around a military base, you have a lot of different cultures. And so in Seattle, there is a large interracial population. Okay. So in the 70s, biracial marriages or interracial marriages was a thing.
Right.
You had black and white marriages. And so so my parents were married in the 70s, had me, I was the first of their four. I was born in 1980. I was the first of their, biracial children. But I would say we were one of the first, right? So I didn't have a lot of biracial friends. I felt like I was one of the older biracial friends. So growing up in the 80s, I'll say, as a biracial child, what I ran into wasn't necessarily how was I treated by others. What I felt more, because it was I was much more accepted on the West Coast. Whereas when I moved to Texas, when I was in kinder and first and second and third grade, it was much more taboo for my mom and dad to be married. And so when I moved to Lake Charles, when I was in high school, when I went to a mostly all black school, or, a lot of my classmates were black or Cajun or Creole, they didn't believe my mom was white. It was very taboo. And that was in the 90s, like mid 90s. And my parents had been married since the 70s, and it wasn't really a big deal from my perspective when I was growing up in Seattle. But what I would describe being a biracial child in the 80s is that there weren't a lot of biracial kids. And so there weren't mixed chick hair products in the 80s. Okay. And mixed chick hair product is an actual label now, right? For biracial curly hair. That didn't exist in the 80s. Right. And so what I had to do in order to do my hair was, my dad had S-Curl, Jerry Curl spray under the cabinet, and my mom had Aquanet hairspray under the cabinet. So my biracial hair product consisted of big old bangs, hair sprayed with this Aquanet hairspray, pulled back, and then I would, like juice down my ponytail with my dad's S-Curl, Jerry Curl, spray. And so that was like the original mixed chick hair product.
Oh my gosh. So I don't know. Okay. And I'm going to get back to it, but I don't know if you ever watched Mixish with, it was a spinoff from Blackish. Did you watch that?
Yes.
Okay. So you're sounding like Rainbow right now.
Yes.
Huh?
I've heard pieces. I've had several people tell me the different, pieces and episodes of the show. And I haven't had an opportunity to sit down and watch a full one myself, but I've heard.
Oh, you're sounding like Rainbow, because she was a biracial kid in the 80s, and it just sounds a lot like her story. Wow, that's interesting that you had to do that just to get your hair a certain way.
Right.
So, okay, so your community, different ways, but what about your family? Your father was black, your mother was white. How did the different families, how was that dynamic with both sides?
Right, absolutely. Again, because my mother's father was he was Irish and Polish, and he had retired on the military base, and so he had not been around a lot of African Americans. So the stories are, initially when they first started dating, there may have been some, what we would say, inappropriate or conversation or things that were said, not very aware. But once my mom and dad married, my mom's parents absolutely accepted my dad. Okay. And then on the other side, my dad's family, African American, same thing. Big Mama is my black grandmother on my dad's side. They were raised in a segregated South where they experienced, the 50s and the 60s and segregation and raising 15 black children in the segregated South. Wow. And so things and experience things firsthand. And so there is definitely a stigma there, right? And so, but as soon as, like I said, this is why people say love conquers all, is because as soon as that biracial grandbaby came home, everything else went out the window, right? Yeah. And so even, whether or not there was a desire for my dad to marry a white female or not, once I came to Big Mama's house and they saw this baby and their blood in my veins, it was over, right? Wow. And after that, they took my mom in and accepted her like she was one of them. And so definitely love conquers all. So family dynamics, fortunately for me, both sides of my family, grandparents, my white grandparents and my Black grandparents accepted, loved, embraced, celebrated me and my sisters. And so we grew up being loved, celebrated at both in both environments. I would go to my white grandmother's house and we listened to German and jazz and opera music and eat German food. And then I go to Big Mama's house and we're eating soul food and listen to the Temptations, right? And so we acclimated to both environments because both sides of those families and heritages embraced us, and therefore we embraced them equally.
I love it.
My mom and dad, I would say, had a big hand in that because my dad made it very clear. And if you read the intro to my book, you'll understand. But my dad made it very clear to me very early in life that neither was better, neither was worse, and that I would needed to love both sides of me, both the Black side, the white side. None was superior, none was, oppressed for me in my life. And so that was really my perspective. It was really like, the lens and the goggles that I saw life through, is that I was, neither was better or worse. And so they both embraced me. I both embraced both sides.
I love it. So with your dad doing that, teaching you girls to embrace both, neither was better or worse, what did you guys identify as children, and how do you identify today?
That's such a great question, because we knew my mom and dad, they would teach us what was going on in the world, right? And we would see what was going on in the news and the TV. And though we thought neither is better or worse, because ultimately our identity was ultimately in God, right? And so they taught us that the world says, America, history says, if you have, one drop of Black blood, you are Black. Right. And when we would about school forms, my mom would write in intentionally every year, Black/white, Black/white, or white/Black, every time. Every single time that school form would come back to us saying Black, every time. Wow. And so we knew the world is going to try to force us to be Black and say, you are Black. They never gave us an option to say that you are white, or you could be white if you wanted to. It always said, you are Black. And so we knew it. We didn't let it, dictate what we would do, change our minds. We wouldn't let it depress us. We wouldn't, we just knew it was what it was, but ultimately we knew who we were. And so we didn't let it bother us. I would say, so because majority, and I told you I moved around a lot, but majority of my childhood and younger years before going to college, because the majority of them were in Seattle, and Seattle is a very mixed population, like I said, because of the military base. And my neighbors, I had Asian neighbors that were from Korea, Vietnam, China, Japan. Those were my best friends. I had mixed best friends. I had Black best friends. I had white best friends. I had neighbors that were Russian, and some from Saudi Arabia. So it was such a like a melting pot, and even internationally, that we were comfortable in our skin to say we are biracial, we are mixed. Whereas when I lived in Texas and Louisiana, we felt more forced or obligated to identify and say we were Black because of the culture, right? And around us. And that was from both the white side and the Black side, is to say, you're Black, you have Black blood, you're Black, you need to be Black. So I grew up most of my life saying I'm mixed, I'm biracial. I don't say that I'm Black, because I also don't say that I'm white. I am both. And so majority of my sisters would say that. Now, to make it, let's say, easy for culture, we may put Black on a form, or we may say it in a form where, mixed or biracial is an option, or being mixed didn't necessarily make sense that it didn't necessarily equate to Black and white, because you can be mixed with Black and Korean, or Black, whatever, Korean and Chinese. So we may say it for the ease of others around us, but in my heart, I always know I'm mixed, I'm biracial, though I know I identify in many ways with my Black cousins and family because of even the features that I have, right? But I also have features of my white mother, and then my hair is, a feature of being very biracial and very big curly hair, and neither of my family know how to do my hair, so.
Love it. So, okay,
Yeah.
so LeTesha, as you know, our country has been in a racial divide for some years now. And to me, it started, I mean, we've always had racial divide, but it's been very, very intense. And to me, it seemed to start when President Barack Obama was elected in 2008. And that's when you saw a lot of vision coming. After his second term, America showed us what they really thought about it, and they voted in Donald Trump in 2016. And and before I go there, you know, you would think since Barack was the official first Black president, and I say official because they used to say Bill Clinton was the first Black president. So he was the official Black president, as well as he was a biracial president. So you would think that with both sides, you know, things would be easier for us. You know, things would have gotten better for our country. He wasn't just voted in by Black America. He was voted in by white America, because it was no way he would have won with just the minority vote. Yeah. So fast forward to 2016, Donald Trump becomes our president, and he pretty much has spewed hate, encouraged it, as well as encouraged the insurrection January 6th of this year in an attempt to take over the Capitol. And people lost their lives because of this. What are your thoughts on what I just shared, and how does your book help us find unity in all of this?
Yeah, it's very difficult, Sonia. You know, I actually wrote my book in it was the beginning of 2018, but it came after 2017 because, like you said, you know, we all know 2020 was a crazy year, but 2017 actually preceded, like, the procession of 2020. 2017 was the year that brother and sister, cousin, friend, coworkers started unfriending each other on social media. And that was the, inaugural year of Trump, right? And so things became very polarized, very, argumentative, a lot, conflict really arose. And I know you said, many can say, well, it maybe track back to even Barack in 2008. But I think many of us who, whether we felt that or not beforehand, we really saw it in 2017. And so 2017 also, in the NFL, it was, the stand versus kneel over the flag. And at the end of that year, I just couldn't handle it personally anymore. And I would always say, I've always considered myself to be maybe a peacemaker or peacekeeper would probably be the better way to say that. Peacekeeper. And it was not because I was intentional, right? And you know me, it wasn't because I was trying to be intentional. That was the way I was raised. Like I said, I have white family, I have Black family, I have Republican family, I have Democrat family, I have Catholic family, I have Baptist family. I have church family, I have unchurched family. I have family that has money in the bank, and I have family that doesn't have money in the bank. And so the dynamic of my life experience basically gave me the key to to unlock doors, to understand both sides of the spectrum, I guess is the way to say that, right? And then moving around in different cultures and economies. When I lived in Seattle at the time, it was very libertarian and or Democrat. Louisiana was Democrat, but Texas was Republican. And so I also had family and friends that I love and that I would walk hand in hand and that I was in unity with, that were on both sides of the spectrum, right? Down to my family, down to people I share blood with. And so I couldn't handle what was happening in 2017. I literally prayed and said, God, what is the answer? What do we need to do here? And at the end of 2016 is when I, said that prayer. 2018, January hit me, and I heard, you need to write a book. You need to share your story. And I thought to myself, what? I don't have a story. What are you talking about here? I'm not writing a book. I moved around. I attended 13 different schools by the time I was 15, and so what I realized in writing my book is that I had experienced both sides of that spectrum, whether it was attending a school in Lake Charles, Louisiana, where I was getting A's, Sonia, and I moved to Washington, north of Seattle, and I'm getting D's in my English class when I was just getting A's. Well, why? So when I shared my experience now in my book, you can argue whether you're Democrat, you're Republican, or like I said, all the things on the spectrum. But when you share your experience and say, hey, I experienced a school system where I was getting an A plus, and I moved to another school system on the west coast of the country and I was getting a D minus, and I hadn't changed. I hadn't done anything different, but there was a system apparently that failed me. And so, some may argue there's not systematic issues, right? Well, if I tell you my experience that I went from an A plus to a D minus and I hadn't changed, there's something wrong there, right? There's something wrong with the system. And so, but I also had lived, in a house with a swimming pool, and I had lived in government housing, and I had, went to school with all white, and I'd gone to school with all black, and I lived in the rural, and I lived in the city, and I lived in suburbia. And so I could identify with people who lived in those communities, and I understood their stories because I too understood their stories. And so when I was writing my story, I realized, oh my goodness, this is a blessing. What I had maybe looked at as maybe a curse that I'd moved around so much, right? Because I was always the new kid, and it was embarrassing, and I was shy, and I didn't want to move around, and I didn't always have what I felt like I need to have. But then when I realized life experiences gave me the ability to identify and ultimately have empathy for people that were different from one another, it put me in this position of being a bridge maker, right? Not just not a peacekeeper anymore, but now a peacemaker. Now I was put in this position to make peace between two opposing views. And ultimately, that's really the position I have been in and have taken since I've written the book is, let's hear your story. Because Sonia, I can argue all day long whether or not I believe in, name it, XYZ of the right side or the left side. But until I tell you what my experience is, I can say, hey, I don't believe that, women should raise children by themselves. I don't believe in divorce. But then if someone tells me their story of being raised by a single mother, right, and that their father left them or their father was abusive, then I now have empathy for that story, right, for that experience. And now I can't argue whether it's right or wrong, but I can have empathy for it, right? And once I have empathy for someone's situation, whether it's left or right, then it creates this place of compassion. And now I can listen, and now I can hear your perspective. And then you and I now can collaborate and have a discussion versus this bipolar conflict where we're saying, well, no, I'm right, or no, I'm right, or no, you should think this way, or no, you should think that way. But it's sometimes it's compromise, but it's not necessarily compromising on your values, but it's an opportunity to have empathy and say, I understand your perspective now. That's not what I agree with, or that's not what I want to do. When we come at each other with our opinions or our beliefs, we automatically are polarizing ourselves from 50% of the people in the room. But when you come in and say, hey, this is my story, this is my experience, this is how the Democrat Party impacted my family, this is how the Republican Party impacted my family. And those could be positive, and both of those could be negative, depending on what happened and what was going on in your family. And I could speak in my book, share just that. I share how there were times where the Republican Party hurt my family, or it benefited my family, or the Democrat Party hurt my family, or it benefited my family, or how living in the white community, or the black community, or living in a house with a swimming pool, or living in government housing, right? And so again, it's about understanding the other person's perspective and how can we build a bridge.
Okay. So, like we mentioned earlier, we've been knowing each other. I met LeTesha in 2005, and we actually met at a company we were working for. Became very good friends immediately. I mean, it was just like instant friendship. And then we find out we go to the same church. So the church that we went to was one of the most diverse churches I've ever experienced in my life, to the point where the choir that I was in, it had every nationality on the earth in that choir. And I was like, God, this is how heaven is going to be. Our pastor was Caucasian, you know, great church, loved it. However, and this is for me, I'm telling my story because I couldn't understand. So when 2016 comes and, you know, Trump gets in 17 or whatever, I noticed the friends that I used to hang out with, some of my Caucasian friends. I mean, I used to sleep at these people's homes. We ate together, sang together, did a lot of things together. They were quiet on a lot of things that were going on. Now, I understand everybody does not share their thoughts and their feelings on social media, and you don't have to. But when you see your sister or your brother in Christ hurting, because there's been a lot of hurting going on in the Black community because of what's been going on, the killings of Black men, Black women by the police, different stuff that's been happening, voters' rights, all of this stuff, and it hurt me. It hurt me, LeTesha, and I'm not really close to those people anymore. I've forgiven them, but it just showed me. I'm like, wow, no one. So you only care about me because you knew me at church and I sang in the choir with you, or you know. So that's how I feel. Am I wrong? I've talked to God about it. I've cried about it because I'm like, I love them. Still love them, but I'm not close to them anymore because my plight doesn't mean anything to you apparently, because you never reached out to me, called me or texted me and was like, hey, I saw your post. I'm so sorry you feeling this way. I love you. This, you know, everyone is not like that. I never got that. So what do you say for people like myself who are dealing with stuff like that? That hurts. It hurts.
I'm so sorry. One, I want to say that I'm very sorry because you're, like you said, your experience is not the anomaly. It's actually the majority.
Yeah.
And I believe in what I see is, you know, a lot of the pain and the wounds that we've already, you know, many of us have had being the minority, right? That it felt like it's just compounded with how many, what we felt like family and friends had responded.
Right.
And what privilege I've had during this time is once my book launched, it launched actually right before the chaos of 2020. So, I mean, it was such a God time. What I've had the opportunity to do since the book launched, Sonia, is have what I call living room conversations. And these living room conversations, I intentionally invited white, I intentionally invited Black. It's, you know, kind of many forums have done something similar, where they call them unity tables or couch conversations. And we were intentional. I was intentional in inviting both to the table. And overwhelmingly, what I learned was that our white brothers and sisters, one, have no idea. They don't know. They don't know the pains and the wounds and that exist. And that's hard to believe, but they've never walked a day. It's so, I know it is. It seems impossible. But when we created these forums, and it was a safe place for everyone to speak, white and Black. Okay. And we said no stones will be thrown here. And when we dove into the reality of our life experiences, and when the Black and brown brothers and sisters would share their experiences, their pain, their hurts, the very thing you just said, majority of our white brothers and sisters in that room you could have picked their mouths up off the floor, because they did not know, they did not understand to the depths. They don't understand to the depths. This is 400 years worth of wounds and pains here, Sonia, especially you, my sister, coming from a state like what I would say is Mississippi. And that's my perception, my perspective, yes. Right? But our white brothers and sisters, especially if they're not from Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, or North and South Carolina, in fact, many of them are the worst because they're on the opposite side of the spectrum. And that's right. I'm not pointing my judgmental way. What I'm saying from my experience of having these conversations is that they don't know, because they have never walked a day in our shoe. They don't understand. This isn't just pain for the last 50 years you've carried. This is pain of our mothers and our grandmothers and our great grandmamas, and that stories that have been passed down for generations of pain that we're carrying, right? And so they don't know, they don't understand to the depth. And when they find out, they almost don't believe it. They almost don't even believe it because they can't believe the amount of trauma and pain and wounds that exist and that you've walked through, that your family have walked through, because they've never seen it. They've never seen it. And it's like you walk around saying, I mean, I don't know. Imagine somebody who's lived in Amazon their whole life and you walk up to them and talk to them about the internet. They couldn't believe what you're telling them about the internet. It's never existed in their world, right? And so you're talking about someone who has, in their paradigm and in their world, has never been the oppressed from a racial standpoint. They could have been oppressed from a gender standpoint or an economic standpoint, but never from a race standpoint. So for you to, they can't identify with that, right? Necessarily, probably. And so these conversations have been so powerful because then it gives them the opportunity to share. I don't understand. I don't know. I didn't know this exists. And what I've seen, the most beautiful thing happen is many of them come to a place of repentance. And I'm so sorry. One, either I've contributed to this, or maybe I didn't contribute, or I didn't know, or now I see you. I see you in a way I've never seen you before. And now they've taken on many times, I need to take on the responsibility and ownership to then understand and become friends and really live in the community. Because Sonia, you just told me you slept at their houses, you sang with them. But let me ask this, when have they slept in your house? Have they slept on the floor with you? Did they know the story of your grandmama, right? Or your big mama? Do they know what you've really gone through from a racial standpoint, right? And we don't get to really see this on TV. It's not in magazines, it's not in books. It wasn't prior to 2020. And so they don't know. And I'm not giving them an excuse. I'm just saying that's why. And then also what we learned was through this process, not only do they not know, but then they don't know how to comfort you or console you or show compassion in an authentic, in a real way that would even give you any solace, that would even give you any peace, or that would even comfort you. Therefore, they are silent because they don't know how. And so they almost need their Black brother or sister to say, this is painful, this is hurtful, this is how I need you to comfort me. This is what I need from you right now, right? And then, after that, if they still don't make steps forward, then you really do have to question what, where really their heart is and things of that nature. And, unfortunately, too many people are more, committed to their political party than they are committed to loving people, right? And that's a whole nother layer, right? Because you're dealing with people all along that journey, that they are more committed to a political leader or a political party than they are really committed to really loving people. And that's a part of this problem as well.
Right.
But this living room conversation has been so powerful. No, you're fine. And just healing. I have to tell you a quick story that came out of that. I have a really good friend. She's from Alabama. She's Black. She was raised to not trust white people. I might go to school with them, but I won't let them in my home. I won't ever let them in. And then I have a friend that was white. She was from Virginia. Her family lives in Virginia where like the first slaves landed, okay? And her family was taught that slavery was a good thing because it taught Africans the gospel, right? I mean, as backwards as you can even.
No,
right?
I have a scripture that I'm going to mention about that shortly, but go ahead.
Women out of this, going through my book and doing these living room conversations together, two women who would never, right, come together. One's Democrat, one's Republican, as far as left, far as right. And they come together and they build a bridge through understanding each other's perspective, whether it was right or whether it was wrong. And they now are best friends. They now have a motto called one relationship at a time. They are intentional of living their life together and understanding each other's backgrounds, sharing food, listening to each other's music, knowing each other's children and their husbands. And they have had the most difficult conversations that friends have ever had. And it is the most incredible thing that I've ever witnessed. It's possible, but we have to teach people.
And I agree. I agree. I really believe that it's possible. Sometimes it's impossible to me to believe that they don't understand or they don't know. I hear, for instance, and you mentioned, about the suffering of Blacks for the last 400 years. And, and you even mentioned how some, like that's how they use the Bible to get Black slaves to understand this is what God wanted. Ephesians 6:5-8 is one of those scriptures that they use to justify slavery. And it's where Paul states, slaves, be obedient to your human masters with fear and trembling in sincerity of heart as to Christ. And this is, I hear a lot of Black people saying, this is why I don't go to church, because they, white people actually believe this and think it's okay to have slavery. You don't know this, but you probably do know this, but Mississippi just abolished slavery in 2013. It was rectified after 185 years. They had never ratified that amendment. So when I was born in the 70s, I could have been a slave because they had never ratified it. That is infuriating to me. No, it's like, why? It feels like, why do they hate us so much? I don't understand. And that's why I brought you on here, because it's like, what are the keys to helping us? First of all, my mother, her grandmother is white, and she never taught us to hate, but she was born in Mississippi. She'll be 80 in October. And she does not have a lot of trust for them. She does not. My niece married a white man. They're having a biracial baby in October.
Yeah.
We have to now learn how to deal with this, because this is, like you said, when you see that back, we're excited. We're ready for him to get here. We're so excited. And I want him to have a loving, fulfilled life. But it's so hard because so much is going on in this country. And I have to know that God is he loves us all.
Yes.
And he wants us to unite.
Amen.
But how? How do we unite? When you say some of them don't know, how do we unite if they don't want to learn? I think when George Floyd, I didn't watch it because I have to take care of my mental health. But when everybody was at home in 2020 and they saw this man snuff his life out, that's when a lot of white people was like, oh my God, they didn't know. But Breonna Taylor, Sandra Bland, Trayvon Martin, all of these people were killed and y'all didn't know. And that's why I don't understand that part.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's, again, there's no excuse, especially now, right? I mean, after 2020, everybody should be woke at this point, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Before that, if you think about media, and unless you watch, CNN or Fox 24/7, think about what's on the media. I mean, growing up as a biracial person, I didn't have dolls. I didn't see anyone in the media that looked like me, right? Or even, if there was a Black person on the TV show, it was actually probably going to be a biracial person, right? It's just, you can't trust, media isn't educating everyone on what they need to know, right? And what's really going on. Our communities, it's like an underground, right? We hear about it, even if the news doesn't share it, right?
Right.
But you made a really great point about why people don't want to go to church or even rejecting, the gospel, because the Bible's been used to support slavery. And in fact, there's something called the Slave Bible. And the Slave Bible, and this is actually in the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C., an incredible museum. And on one floor, they have Bibles that span from the beginning of time until now. The Slave Bible had approximately thirds of the Bible of scripture removed from it.
Wow.
You guess what major scriptures were removed? Anything that had to do with hope, being redeemed, release, or being set free. So the whole book of Exodus was removed. Why do you think Exodus was removed? Right?
Because they were free, the Israelites.
That's where God came down and said, I hear your cries, I see you, I will heal you, and I will release you. Because that is the heart of God. What did Jesus when he came in Isaiah 61, 1 and 2, he's saying, I came to set the captives free, right? That is the heart of Jesus. And so anyone who is rejecting the gospel is ultimately saying, I'm rejecting freedom. No, they don't know that, right? Because mankind, evil mankind, has used the Bible to support slavery. That's not God's heart. The year of Jubilee is all about being set free, God giving back people the land and anything that was taken from them. If they
Right.
were if they were slaves, they were set free. If land was taken, they were given back to them. That's always been the heart of God, is to redeem and restore and to set people free, set captives free. That is the heart of God. So when I asked God, what's the answer to what's happening right now, Sonia, this is what he gave to me. He told me to go research the Samaritan people.
Mhm.
And I'm like, what? The Samaritan? I heard the parable of the Samaritan. Everybody's heard the parable of the Samaritan. I researched every scripture and passage that had to do with the Samaritan person. Samaria, however you want to say it, from the beginning to the end. And in the long story short, this is what I found. The Samaritan people were created out of the Hebrews being taken captive, slaves, into Assyria, right? Those of the lower class were left behind, and they were intermingled against their own will with the foreigners of that area. Does that sound familiar?
Yes.
They then became a mixed race of people. Okay, does this sound familiar? When the Hebrews came back from Babylon and came back to rebuild the wall, there was now a mixed race, the Samaritan Jews in essence, and then there were the full purebred Jews. And between the two of them became conflict. They hated each other because the Samaritans were a half-breed, mixed breed, right? And that's where the title of my book comes from, is half-breed. They're now a mixed breed, and they worship differently. They have different leaders, right? And you have this purebred who now have saying, we are supreme. We're supreme to the Samaritans. And these two races of people now hate each other, and they fight. The Samaritans actually tried to sabotage the Jews from rebuilding the wall. When Ezra the prophet came back, he actually said, you need to divorce all your Samaritan wives. It was war between them. They hated each other. Right. Even until time when Jesus walked the earth. When Jesus walked the earth, what did they do? His disciples wanted to walk around Samaria, right? They wanted to avoid walking through Samaria because they despised them because of their race, because of their ethnicity. Okay. And so one of the first things, and if you read the New Testament in chronological order, as soon as Jesus accepts his ministry, one of the very first things he does is Mark 4. Mark 4 is actually one of the first things he does. He intentionally walks through Samaria to meet a woman who is a Samaritan woman. That shows you the heart of God. He says, I'm going to take on your shame, your guilt, your oppression. I'm going to drink out of your cup, right? Of the woman. She's Samaritan. And the Samaritans were actually called, a racial slur was called a Samaritan dog. The Pharisees called Jesus a Samaritan dog at one point because that's how much they hated each other.
Wow. So
right before Jesus is on his way to complete his final destiny onto the way to the cross, he sends the 70 disciples out, and they actually go to Samaria. The Samaritans actually racially profile, and they actually kick out the Jews from Samaria. They don't want them there. So the disciples, the Hebrew disciples, actually experienced racism themselves from the Samaritans because they hated each other. Now, what does Jesus tell the parable? We come to the parable of the Good Samaritan. This Samaritan, it says there was a hurting and dying man laying. He was Jewish, okay? A hurting and dying man's laying in the ditch. Who walks by first and ignores him? The Pharisee. What does the Pharisee represent, Sonia? The religious elite, right? The elite, maybe even the economic elite in that society. What does that sound like to us today? Then he said he ignores the man and he walks across the street. The next guy who comes by is the Levite. The Levite actually comes up and pokes his nose and looks at the guy, and then he walks across the street. The Levite is like the average guy who works in the temple. He comes and serves and volunteers. He then leaves him alone. The third person who comes along is who? The Samaritan. Okay, wait up. The Samaritan, 700 years of racial oppression, okay? It is the Samaritan that goes and picks up the man and does what? Puts him on his donkey, pours oil on him, takes him to the hotel, pays, and says, and I'll come back and take care of him, right? That is a Samaritan. What is Jesus saying to us? Those who've experienced oppression and knows what it's like. That Samaritan knew that his daddy and his granddaddy and his great granddaddy had been at war with the Jews racially, right? That had been oppressed. And it was the Samaritan that loved, because ultimately love does something. Because it said the Samaritan was moved with compassion. Compassion is having empathy. Yes. The Pharisee did it. The Levite didn't. It was the Samaritan. And the Samaritan said, I'm going to come back, which means I'm going to be in relationship with you. What does that look like for you and I? That looks like you and I saying, hey, in spite of the oppression that I've experienced, of my grandmama, my daddy, I have stories for 700 years that I can still be moved with compassion and love someone who opposes me politically, religiously, racially, financially, economically, that I can still go and serve someone and even be in relationship with them, right? Because he said, I'm coming back. And so that was the story ultimately when God said, go research the Samaritan people. Like, that's the heart of God, is that we need to always be in a place of compassion. And that goes both ways. That's a white, that's Black, that's a Republican, that's Democrat, that's Catholic, Baptist, that's everybody. But also love does something. It also takes ownership, right? It doesn't ignore, right? Because that Pharisee ignored the pain and the wounds of that person. And you said, I've had friends who were Christians that were ignoring my pain. That's not the heart of God. That's not the heart of God, right? The religious elite that know every scripture in the word, but yet they're going to ignore pain and wounds of people. The message of reconciliation, as Christians, we carry the gospel and the message, the ministry of reconciliation. And so if we're ignoring people who are dying and who are wounded and who are hurt and beaten and battered, that is not the heart of God. And so any Christian that's walking around not acknowledging the pains and the wounds of other people, they're not walking out the love of Christ, the ministry. I agree. Now I'm going to fast forward a little bit. After he tells this parable, he's on his way to the cross, and he stops and he has a prayer. And his prayer is it John 10 or John 17? I'm going blank right now. And he prays the prayer of unity. He says, God, let them, you and me, let them be in unity like you and I are in unity. Let them be one. And so he was praying that you, Sonia, and me, and our white Christian friends, and our Asian, and our Black, and our white, and all of us, our Republican, our Democrat, that ultimately we would lay all that to the side and say, we are one. We will be in unity as God, Jesus are in unity. And then he goes to the cross. Now, when he came back to his disciples, where did he tell them to go? He said, go to Judea, Jerusalem, and Samaria. What? Why would he tell them to go into Samaria? Samaria is a place where we hate them. We don't get along with those with that race or that political party or that denomination. And the gospel, the church has been persecuted, right? In Jerusalem. It then spreads to Samaria. Once it spreads from Samaria, it goes on to the Gentile nation. And here's what you just said to me. People don't want to go to church. People don't want to read the Bible because of this disunity. But unity is the heart of God, and it is the way to expand and grow the church. And so ultimately, when you and I are not unified, and we allow our political party or our race or anything else that we lay on the table, right, and we allow that to come between us, we're not unified, the church is falling apart. It's being destroyed, and the church is the greatest hope the world has. Because you and I know that we have had to walk through all kinds of healing in our life, even outside of our race, right? Whether it was being a woman, whether it's abuse, whether it's abandonment, right? There's a slew of things that we need to all be healed from and have compassion for each other. And the church is the greatest resource for our healing. And if the church is destroyed, then none of us have hope. None of us have hope. That's true. And so it is the master plan that you and I have to find, that we have to be peacemakers so that we can walk in unity. Therefore, the church can be the church and can be the light on the hill. Otherwise, what Jesus prayed will never come true. And it's ultimately our part in helping him come back, right? So that the church can be the bride. So that's hard, because that's big, right? And so how do you take those small steps? We got to take personal responsibility of being the ambassadors here on earth. We have to be the good Samaritan. You got to be the good Samaritan. I have to be the good Samaritan, right? We can't ignore people's pain. We have to be reconcilers. We have to be intentional of being reconcilers. We have to share our story. Sonia, you have to share your story with your Caucasian friends and family that didn't know your story, so that they can have their eyes opened and build that bridge and have compassion for your story and have empathy for your story. And that way they can be an ally. They can stand up for you. They can use their voice to help fill the gap, right? And we all of us have to be intentional of building relationships with people that don't look like us, because if our paradigm is always in a community where everyone looks like us, suffers the same things that we suffer,
Right.
have all the same cultural issues, then we're gonna be able to open the eyes to others. To each, like you said, it's hard to believe that someone doesn't understand this, but I'm telling you, friends of mine that live in Montana or Utah or Seattle. I lived in Seattle, and when I moved to Lake Charles, I was shocked at the level of the racism that I saw and felt in 1995 with my parents being biracial. Why?
Wow.
Because I didn't experience that in Seattle. And so someone may say, "Oh, I don't understand how you didn't know that would be a thing." Because where I lived and where I came from, my paradigm, it didn't exist, or I didn't see it, I didn't
Right.
experience it. And that's why
Right.
it's so important for us to share our experiences with people who don't have those experiences. Because even though they may not experience the same thing, Sonia, I may not have been abandoned by my father, but if you share the pain of being abandoned by your father, I may say, well, I understand what being abandoned by a friend, or someone may have been raped as a female, right? Or someone may have been abused by a husband. Our experiences are not the same, but we can have compassion for pain and wounds of
Right.
rejection and abandonment and oppression. And that's why we have to share the story, because that's our connection. Oppression, abuse, rejection, abandonment. It's not that they can identify with a Black female being raised in Mississippi, right? And so we all have to take our part in being peacemakers, reconciling. That is the true gospel of Jesus. It really
You're right.
is.
You're right. And you mentioned a little bit of, and I was going to mention this. It's funny how you brought that up. It's in a book blurb you had, and the question is it possible that those who are oppressed, discriminated, and rejected hold the potential to unlock healing and reconciliation? And you mentioned that when you were just speaking. However, it's interesting, like you said, the book came out before 2020,
Yeah.
and George Floyd has brought unity with a lot of people who would not. I mean, when I found out that the Amish were
I know.
marching, Amish, they don't even have TV. Witches
Right.
and warlocks, they, really everybody, it was unity. Asians, Japan was marching. It brought unity. And I mentioned last year, I put a post out, and I had a friend, she used to have really bad acne, and she would have to use this medicine. And we knew it was working because her face got really, really bad. It was very ugly. And things have gotten really ugly, even more uglier since George Floyd.
Right.
But I think the medicine is working. I believe things are changing. It may not seem like it, but I really do think things are changing.
Right.
You also, one of your other blurbs, you mentioned, could there be a larger purpose for unity within race, creed, and color? And what is the solution for the political, racial, and social unrest in our country? Could you just give, a little synopsis on what you meant by that?
Yeah, and it's just, what you mentioned, I love what you mentioned too, is that we would have never imagined what came out of George Floyd and the sacrifice ultimately of his life has now produced, right? Recognizing Juneteenth, right? Here in there's companies, large Fortune 500 companies that are now acknowledging Juneteenth as a national holiday, and giving their employees work off time, and libraries and books and just amazing things that have surfaced, right? And back to a little bit of what I was sharing earlier is that we have to be unified. We really ultimately, as a believer, we have to be unified to fulfill the Great Commission, the great purpose of building the church. We are his bride. And the word says that he's coming back to have where his bride is not blemished. Well, right now we all look very blemished, right?
Yes.
Like you said, the acne is rising, right? But the more we experience this and the more we talk about it and we really delve deep into the pains and the wounds and allow them to come to surface, that's where the healing is coming from. And so, being a bridge maker ultimately in these conversations of political and racial and social is where in my experience, is where it brings healing. Is let's hear Sonia's story, but then let's also hear the white neighbor next door who says, I didn't know, I didn't understand why. And moving to a place of having even empathy for her, or having empathy for the white friends who they are of the lineage of slave owners. Because the reality is, until you're healed, Sonia, she's not even healed.
That's
right? Because stigma, that's a shame, that's guilt even on her. And we need to move from a place of even just having that they need to have empathy and compassion and healing for us, that we also need to have it for them. So that's where when true unity comes into place, that, man, I hate that you have a heritage that blood is stained on your family's name. And so moving into a true place of unity, of healing for all, because until you're healed, they're not healed. And until they're healed, you're not healed, right? That's where true unity is going to come into place.
I love it. I love it. And I'm going to, you know me very well. I'm going to work on being a bridge maker. I mean, I don't hate anybody. I just, when I'm hurt, I pull back.
Yeah.
And sometimes, and I'm working on that, but I'm going to try to be a bridge maker in that way. I appreciate that. And this, we can talk, I mean, we would talk for hours on it because there's so many, this is an onion and it's different layers. It's no way we can finish this in a show. So I would definitely have to bring you back. I'm sorry.
I said, yeah, you're right. We're just hitting the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm gonna have to bring you back. But since this is a sports podcast, I'm gonna talk a little sports with you today. So, but
please do.
So, and it's still dealing a little bit with racism. So you're like, okay. So, of course, you've heard of Sha'Carri Richardson. She's our homegirl in Dallas, native of Dallas. And she is going to the 2021 Olympics. She will be running in the track and field, 100-meter dash. She opted out for the 200-meter. However, it's been more talk about what she wears and how she has her hair versus what she does on that track. People are having issues with the color of her hair. People are having issues with her nails and just her flamboyant style. It reminds me of Florence Griffith Joyner, who is still the fastest woman in the world. Her records for 100-meter and 200 meters still stands. And she actually said she was paying homage to Griffith Joyner. Florence used to wear, her hair was not colored, but it was big hair. Her nails were very long, manicured, colored. And she used to wear the one leg leotard and, but people, why is that a form of racism? And why should that even be an issue if this person is doing what they need to do to bring a gold medal home?
Yeah, I think it goes back to, once again, experience and understanding of cultures, right? And so who are the commentators? Who are the ones making the comments? Where are they from? What's their background? What's their understanding and experience or appreciation for that culture, right? And so if there is a lack there, then of course there's going to be a lack of appreciation or understanding or celebration of this person who is, you know, she, I mean, you and I know have family and friends that dress just like dress just like her, right?
Yes.
And so I think that lack of appreciation, and you know, at the end of the day, we live in a very fallen world, and media is wants to, whether they can have a story to tell something great or they can have a story to bring someone down.
Right.
It's the world that we live in, you know, and it's unfortunate. And so why it's so important to have, you know, media and those like yourself that are going to bring the truth or the real life experience of someone's story rather than judging them based on whether it's the color of their hair or the color of their skin, right?
Right.
And so yeah, you hate that. We live in a fallen, ugly world. And so I love when she gets a chance to talk, and I love what she shared about, hey, no one knows what I go through. Her mom, just her birth mother, had just passed away,
Just
you
passed
know, a few
away.
weeks ago. Out there on the track doing her thing. But you know what? Sometimes that's what it takes for people to have compassion in their heart to be softened is, wow, mom just passed. I wouldn't have talked about her hair color. I wouldn't have talked about her nails. I wouldn't have talked about how flamboyant she is had I known that about her mom. And it shouldn't have to take that.
Yeah, it
but
shouldn't even have to happen like that.
You shouldn't
Right.
have to have that. And that again goes back to the power of sharing your story, right? Power of sharing your story.
I agree. And well, I wish her well. I am a fan of hers.
Yes.
She amazes me. That's all I can say. She amazes me, and I'm so excited for her future.
Yes.
I pray that she actually breaks the record of Florence. And the reason is because it's a way of paying homage. And then it shows that regardless of how their hair was or what they wore, they won those medals with style and class. And that's what I'm looking for, more so with that young lady. I'll be cheering her on. So LeTesha, before I let you go.
I am too. You know,
Yeah,
you remember I ran track in Washington. So
oh, that's right. You sure did. You sure did. And and you still run. Do you still run? Because you did marathons too, right?
You know, as I'm getting older and Ubering my children around to all sporting events, I'm doing as much as I like. So maybe I'll pick up a little bit once they're out of the house.
Whatever. Well, they'll be gone in 2 years, so I'm sure you'll pick your running back up.
I'm see if I can fit that outfit on and go out there and run a little bit. So,
well, before I let you go, I have a little game I play, and it's just a way for myself and the listeners to get to know the guests better. It's called "You Can Get With This" or "You Can Get With That." And so I'll ask a question, and you just you just let me know which one you prefer. Okay?
Okay.
You ready? Okay. You better get this one. You better get this one right. Okay. Chipotle or Freebirds?
Chipotle.
Good job. A night on the town or a night on the town or a cozy night at home?
That's hard, depending on how old I am now. I probably do a cozy night at home.
Oh my God. Would you stop with the old? Makeup or no makeup?
No makeup. I'm an athlete. I got to be able to get ready in 5 minutes.
That's me. I love it. I hate makeup. Glasses or contacts?
Glasses, because you can wear cute frames.
Well, I have readers. I don't have to wear like real glasses, but I love getting my new frames every year. Cooking or eating out?
Eating out. I hate cooking.
You're over
I'm
it.
a good cook. Yeah, I don't want to.
Oh yeah, I remember. Yeah, you cooked the dinner too. Yeah, you can cook. Movies.
Thank you.
Movies or Netflix series?
Movies.
Movies. Okay. Football or baseball?
Football all day long.
Straight hair or curly?
Well, you know, I'm sitting here with a curly head afro going on here, so I'm gonna go with curly hair because it's how I wear 99% of the time. So
I love it. I love it. Big city living or small town living?
Ooh, that's hard. I've done it. I've done both.
And I didn't know that when I didn't know that when I got these, was putting this together either.
As I have more life experience, I'm really enjoying. I like the small time living. I like the small town. I like the just more people. I live by cows now, Sonia. I moved since the last time we saw each other, and I'm surrounded by cows and coyotes and snakes and spiders, and I love it.
And you, well, I have to find out exactly what area you're in when we get off this call. Wow. So the last one I think is really cute because I know how close you are to your sisters, and so Mary Alessi or Martha Munizzi.
Oh, what would you pick between them? I love them both.
I know.
I can't pick. I love them both.
You got to choose one.
Oh, okay. I'll just say Mary, only because I've met Mary.
And she was at our church all the time.
But I love Martha, and I hear her on the radio. Yeah, but Mary always came to our church, so that's why I'll pick Mary.
And I actually sang, I sang on one of her albums. So I love both of them too, but I think I have to say Mary because I actually knew her and sang on her album. So cool. LeTesha, thank you so much for joining me today. This talk was very insightful and powerful. We have to learn how to walk in forgiveness. It's a challenge sometimes. It's not always easy, but it's best not to give that energy and to allow God to do what he needs to do in all of our hearts. So tell the listeners how they can follow you on social media and how they can order your book.
Absolutely. So you can buy my book on Amazon. The name of the book, like Sonia said, is Half Breed: Finding Unity in a Divided World. You can also find me on social media, Instagram at LeTesha Wheeler, LeTesha Wheeler, or my website, LeTeshaWheeler.com.
Awesome. And guys, you can follow me at She Say Sports on Facebook, She Say Sports 23 on Instagram. I have a Twitter. I have that next time. I don't know it very, I got to start really working on that. But until next time, guys, that's my show. And join us next time for She Say Sports, and I'll see you next time.